Story 1. I saw all of the PM me usernames and thought, what is the most crass thing I could ask for? So crass that nobody would take it seriously and would immediately understand its satirical nature? Unfortunately, I had not considered Poe's law. Story 2. I have been using this username since I was a teenager, over 20 years ago. I thought to myself, I'm Canadian. I can use the Canadian A to replace the A in a holy. Then I just put crazy in front of it. Ha! I'm so clever. Story 3. My name is associated with the food I eat, which many people do not enjoy, so I consume it privately. Curly kale. Baby. Story 4. My name is Jessica. When I created this account, I was 24. I wish I could say the story had more depth. Story 5. I was discussing religion with a friend and mentioned Jesus. He replied, "Yeah, well, that's Mr. Jesus to you." I thought it was funny. Story 6. I was in a band for almost 20 years called the Funkabilly Playboys. I was the percussionist nicknamed Bongo or Bongo Man. Two of us had the same first name, so this was an easy identifier. Rarely does anyone call me by my real first name, and it's an easy way to distinguish a friend from a complete stranger when I answer a phone call. Story 7. My name is Abs and I'm queer. I found it amusing that I could use my name in the word absolutely, but it probably isn't funny at all. Story 8. When I hear death metal bands, I imagine the singer has come out and said, "This song is called Everybody Solo," thus the name. Story 9. I told a joke once when I was with my grandma, and she burst out laughing until she farted. She then told me, "Joe, you're too funny." Story 10. Mom was a hippie and dad was a rock and roller. She wanted her kids' names to start with vowels. My dad took it from there. Story 11. First, I typed AP. Then I felt whimsical and added an H. But you can't have an H without an O following it. My cat then jumped on my keyboard, adding an E. I looked at the randomly assorted letters and felt an X was needed, but it didn't feel right at that point. So I blindly added two more letters, being N and I, then the X went in. Lastly, I added the common abbreviation for a chemical element that exists but hasn't yet been technically discovered. Story 12. I was cooking in a modern Michelin-starred kitchen when I created my username, and there was a container on the shelf in front of me. Story 13. August Landmesser is the individual in the famous photo. I aspire to have an ounce of his courage. Story 14. I thought it sounded cool when I was a child around 8 years old. It is also a tribute to my maternal grandfather, who was in the Navy and took me on his boat when I was young. Story 15. I was an engineering student pursuing my second degree. It was a play on two KRS-One albums, Criminal Minded and Spiritual Minded. Story 16. It is a fictional name I created with a friend in college to play a joke on another friend who was on YouTube, but in reverse, as it was already taken in the correct format. Story 17. I could share a detailed story about creating a character in a multi-user domain back in 1993. He was a goblin thief, and as a goblin, the name needed to be inspired by violence but also have a comical twist. It shouldn't sound bloodthirsty at all. Additionally, if using common words, I needed to misspell them. While playing Duke Nukem 3D with friends, I encountered a villain called an Assault Commander. One of his voice lines is "Suck it down." This inspired me to think of Sukkit Dawin as a potential name. However, I wanted something more comedic, so I began exploring well-known three-word phrases to combine and spell in a quirky way. Alternatively, I could simply say I heard it in a song. Story 18. I enjoy reading Stormfront because racism fascinates me. This is my attempt to adopt a racist persona, and I find it amusing. Story 19. That I'm just a sublime creature. No, it's just a play on my old Tumblr name that I fell in love with. Story 20. A group of friends and I spent an entire summer experimenting with psychedelics every weekend, now referred to as the wobbly summer. When discussing this around others who might not appreciate conversations about drugs, we would refer to it as taking vitamins to keep it more low-key. Story 21. I had a different name in the past. When I was 16, I liked the red parrot laughing meme, so I changed my name to Red Burb. One day, I inverted the colors of my profile picture and called myself Blue Burb. Eventually, instead of changing back to Red Burb, I changed my profile picture to an actual bluebird, at least on other social platforms. Story 22. There's a gif of fat seals bouncing around various scenes. I find it hilarious. In real life, I go by a very different nickname that is also animal-related. Story 23. I was once locked in a cage, only fed when my captors felt like it, sometimes after days of nothing. They claimed it was a test of endurance, a way to cleanse the body and mind, but all it did was make me weaker. I learned to ration every scrap, never knowing when the next meal would come. Even now, the hunger lingers, a reminder of the days I spent trapped. Just kidding. I fast on purpose every once in a while. Story 24. The first one was from Captain Holt, the other from Monica Geller. I don't know if it makes sense, but they rhyme. Story 25. I had a dream about pulling the veins and tendons from my wrists using pliers. I had a rough childhood and early years after leaving home, but life has turned around, and I'm doing just fine now. Story 26. My old hacker names. I am deleting this again and going back to my gamer name, Solid Gamer. No more searching and no more running in the shadows. No more over-explaining, I promise. Story 27. I keep telling them my name isn't Hell, nor is it Stacy, her, or Jane. People just can't get it right. But I am a riot. Story 28. Lonnie is the name of the daughter of the couple who moved into the apartment my family lived in until 2019, and I liked the name. When I created an account on Crunchyroll, I used L, my real name starts with L as well, and Ani for anime. I'm now using Lonnie as my internet name on nearly every platform. Story 29. When I worked at Apple, I spent a lot of time on internet relay chat with the username Nix. When the iPhone was released, they gave us one. I downloaded internet relay chat on my phone and created a new username, Nixony Phone. Over time, people shortened it to Nixon and that name stuck. That was in 2007, I think. Good times. About 15 years ago, I used that name to create my Reddit account, and here I am. Story 30. Play on my name and emergency services, but added another one because it was early and figured to go for it. This meant to be. Story 31. I joined a fandom forum, but my registration email never arrived, so I had to create a new name for a backup account. I named myself after what fans of my favorite character called themselves. Although I have mostly left the fandom, the name has stuck. Story 32. My Brazilian wife forbids me from saying never, and I'm never content. I am also somewhat of a content creator, so there. Story 33. Every time I told my mom I was having a hard time, feeling stressed or pressured, all she ever said was, "How can you be stressed?" Then she would talk about what was stressing her, and I had to listen. So I stopped talking. Story 34. At first, I was going to use the username I use for everything, but I wanted to remain anonymous, so now I am King Kingly. Story 35. In the early days of the social web, around the time of Pandora and StumbleUpon, there was a social bookmarking site called Delicious. It was an excellent way to find links to various interesting sites, and I was bookmarking extensively. Story 36. It means Starship Marco Polo. It is from a 1978 Norwegian sci-fi show I remember from my childhood. Story 37. In the early days of the social web, around the time of Pandora and StumbleUpon, there was a social bookmarking site called Delicious. It was an excellent way to discover links to a variety of interesting sites, and I was bookmarking extensively. Story 38. My name is Corey, and when I was a young child, I learned about the dinosaur named Corythosaurus. Naturally, it became my favorite dinosaur, and Corythosaurus means helmet lizard, so I refer to it as Hell Lizard. Story 39. It is a modified version of a Boards of Canada song titled Bass Free. Is it my favorite song by them? No, but it is good. I believe I was just listening to it at the time. Story 40. Years before joining Reddit, I was a regular caller to local radio talk shows, and people who met me in real life would recognize me and compliment my calls to the shows. From that, I leaned into a verse from Andre 3000 in the Outkast song, Elevators, Me and You. He kept asking me, what kind of car do you drive? I know you paid. I know you all have many women from all the songs that you have made. I replied that I had been going through the same things he had. True, I have more fans than the average person, but not enough money to last me until the end of the week. I live by the beat like you live paycheck to paycheck. If it doesn't move your feet, then I don't eat, so we are neck and neck. Story 41. Apparently, it is a part of a Japanese temple, some kind of joint structural element. I saw it in an old music textbook from the late 1990s as a caption to a picture that read, Kumamono, a temple in Japan, although it apparently wasn't a temple. The word means rubber shoe in Finnish, which sounds amusing to us and is likely why it was included in the textbook. I have had it for more than 25 years. Story 42. Every school has its unique character. I happen to be that person. After 4 years of my experience, high school is coming to an end. This is the final act, the greatest moment, and one last occurrence before I leave. While I am involved in an incident, I accidentally break part of the toilet, injuring myself. I continue, and the injury becomes contaminated. I am confronted by the principal, leading to a chase through the school, with my hands still unclean. An infection develops, and I collapse on the school track, portraying a dramatic scene as music plays. The camera focuses on me from above, then pulls away, marking the end. Story 43. I love the violin, so I translated the word into several different languages and thought German looked the best. Story 44. I misspelled this song title. Story 45. The English version was already used, which is upsetting because I created that myself for LiveJournal back in 2005, so I translated it to Ancient Greek. Story 46. My nickname in high school came from my love for the movie Super Troopers. The crazy and wild characters inspired my persona. I used to drink a bottle of rum on weekends and engage in adventurous activities. Story 47. It's a state of death. In the Supernatural TV series, it represents a person with autism's heaven. He relives a happy Tuesday afternoon playing in his garden where Castiel was supposed to visit. Story 48. They are the names of my old cats, and they have never been used in any of my passwords, security questions, or usernames. Not very inspired, but there you go. Story 49. I studied logic and was really interested in enthymemes, which are partial arguments with a missing premise. They are everywhere. Story 50. It's a play on the nickname my best friend gave me when I was 10 years old. Originally, it was Rainbow Tears. Story 51. In high school, one of the students couldn't pronounce my name, so he called me Indigo. Then all of the 9th graders started calling me Indigo. Story 52. I have ginger hair, which is stick straight rather than curly or wavy. I also have blue eyes instead of green or brown, and I can actually tan. I consider myself an unusual type of ginger, and hybrid sounds cooler than the alternatives. Story 53. I work in the construction industry. At the time, it mostly involved demolition, and I enjoyed it. They provided me with advanced equipment. Robots called Brocs are the best addition to our tools. Story 54. I absolutely love Marceline from Adventure Time. I've been told that I look and act like her, so it's become somewhat of a nickname. Story 55. I posted about this a while ago, and it received 4 comments. My initials are D.R., and I am studying to obtain a Doctor of Philosophy degree. I used to be called a rat by everyone I knew in grade school, so I adopted the name Ratatouille because I thought it was amusing. Story 56. I am another account of Dr. Ratatouille, but anonymous, so Anonymouse. Since that username was taken, I added 2269 because that used to be my phone password. Story 57. When I cut my hair, someone said I looked like Aunt Cass from Big Hero 6. Unfortunately, I misremembered it as Aunt May from Spider-Man, so that's sticking with me, I guess. Story 58. When young Bruce Wayne was leaving the theater after watching The Mask of Zorro, his parents were robbed at gunpoint and brutally murdered under a dramatic streetlight in Crime Alley. He spent the following years training his mind and body to the peak of physical ability. As he sat in his lonely study, a bat burst through the window, scaring him. He decided to adopt the name Batman in order to strike fear into the hearts of criminals. He is also referred to as the Dark Knight because he strikes from the shadows while protecting the innocent. I then altered it as kids in the 1990s did with random numbers and alternate spellings. Story 59. My dad had a teddy bear from the Roosevelt era when teddy bears were made with real bear fur. He had just passed away when I created this account. Story 60. I'm sure at face value it looks like some moody, angsty thing, but honestly, I was probably just listening to that album at the time. Prepared to be let down ruiner. Story 61. When I was in college, I came across RUR, and later named my character in a Shadowrun campaign Rossum. When I got on the internet in the mid-1990s, Rossum became my frequent username. 81 is because it is 9 squared and 9 is my lucky number. Story 62. Dungeons and Dragons character. One of my friends I played with made me use all my gold because I threw him at a giant spider to defeat it. Story 63. I was getting ready for the neighborhood gathering. I honestly was just trying to find a name that wasn't taken and had no clever ideas. Story 64. I had a friend about 10 years ago who was really into H.P. Lovecraft, and we talked a lot about his work. The phrase non-Euclidean geometry comes up in several stories. When I went to create a new Reddit ID, the phrase came to mind. At that time, I was experiencing some issues that led me to believe that most of what I said wouldn't be accepted or understood by others, so I chose non-Euclidean syntax. Story 65. I listened to the song Bad Company by the band Bad Company on the album Bad Company when I created my user. Story 66. I love nostalgia core, dream core, and liminal spaces. The number 505 is from my favorite song 505 by the Arctic Monkeys. Story 67. A friend of mine used the word discombobulate, which in turn confused me, as I had never heard it before. I made it my life mission to become a true discombobulator. Story 68. A previous partner of mine used to nickname me Tantan. It didn't work out between us, but I kept the account because I didn't want to create a new one. Story 69. Element from the character in Lord's Mobile Elementalist, then for Ecclesiastes in the Bible. Thanks for asking. I just remembered where my element came from. Story 70. It was supposed to match everywhere else, but somehow I messed it up, and Reddit generated one for me. Story 71. This was supposed to be my alternate account, and I have red hair. However, it has a second meaning. You see, I have so many freckles that I call them my ghost freckles or anti-freckles, because they are freckles. They just lack pigmentation and are lighter than my skin tone. Story 72. I have always loved the Greek goddess Athena, and if I ever get the chance, I will name my future adopted daughter Athena. The mention of furry was a mistake. It was supposed to be autism. I gave up trying to spell years ago. Story 73. Hakamoto is a derivative of my name invented by my uncle. We had no connection to Japan, just a random Central Asian family. However, I fell in love with Japanese culture and enjoyed living there for 8 months. Mirza means sir. I wanted to express my connection to both worlds instead of just Hakamoto-san. Story 74. I have been on Reddit since 2005, long before subreddits existed. My first account was over 12 years old. They started sending me alerts like, verify your account or lose all hope. I never verified and lost my main account and my alternate accounts. I tried logging back in or creating new accounts, but there were just too many hoops to jump through. So I lurked for the next decade on various phones. When I got a new phone last August, it created this account on its own, and I didn't even have to try. Now I am commenting again. Story 75. I used to work on F-14 Tomcats similar to those in Top Gun. I didn't fly them, I fixed them. It was my email address a long time ago, back in the days of AOL, and I still use it randomly. I know it sounds lame. Story 76. R7 stands for Rahis, which is my first name. The number 7 is my lucky number. RB stands for Real Boys, referring to me and my friends, not a gang. BD7 represents Bradford 7, where I proudly live. SW stands for Southwest, the area where I live in my city. For example, BD4 represents Southeast. Story 77. When I was 12, my online profile was Saboti Games. However, when I turned 18 and became tired of that name, I switched to Isikes, which is my first name combined with the first letter of my last name. I also find it symmetrical. Story 78. I created Juggalo memes on Instagram when I was younger, and the name just followed me around because I didn't have any better names. Now it's who I am. Story 79. Looked for 2-syllable, 7-letter words and found context. Changed the O into a 0 to make C0 in text, because an O is quite bland. PL refers to Poland because I am Polish. Story 80. S, A, and M are the first letters of my names. H is the first letter of my last name. I am the fourth in my family with my name. Story 81. My old account was banned from a large subreddit, so I created a new account. Since I was unsure what username to choose, I opted for one of the pre-made options. Story 82. Inspiring others is something that genuinely makes me happy. There is nothing better than seeing people grow, push past their limits, and achieve things they never thought possible. It feels natural to me, like something I was born to do, whether through encouragement, advice, or just leading by example. I live to make a positive impact on people's lives. Story 83. I got this name from the Among Us name generator in 2021, and it somehow became my internet name. Story 84. I forgot the password to my original account, so I set up this new one. I wanted to see if anyone could send me a picture of a mullet. It's been 9 years, and I still have not received one. Story 85. It's a mixed version of my real name and surname. I had to use the number at the end because a username without numbers was not available. I used it because it sounded like Rampage, my favorite Grand Theft Auto, Vice City weapon. Story 86. Elsewhere, I was known as 000. I needed a clever new name that nobody would ever guess is actually 000. Story 87. When I was a tween, my PlayStation name was Oh No I Fuck Pop-Tarts, a quote from Wade in a Markiplier video that my mom was not happy about and forced me to change. Story 88. My husband says he is much happier with me than with his first wife, so he started calling me Wife 2.0, the upgrade. Story 89. Most of my internet usernames are variations of no one of consequence, but that was taken, so I started adding words to the end. Considering I work in emergency response, it can be a bit awkward. Story 90. About 15 to 20 years ago, I was into a band called Cold Chamber, which had a song titled Clock. The lyrics mostly repeat the words, tick-tock clock. So, I created my username in the 1999 game StarCraft, Brood War, as tick-tock clock. Over time, an online friend started calling me Tychles, which I accepted as my username. I was annoyed when Kesha released TikTok, because people began to assume that my name referred to that. I can only imagine how frustrating it would have been during the TikTok app era. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.